They say office romances are complicated, but what they don't tell you is how it feels when you fall for someone who's completely out of reach. This is the story of Amara, a young intern who fell for her boss, the day before his wedding. What she didn't know was that choosing love would cost them everything: their careers, their families, and nearly their lives. Amara Chen was 23, fresh out of college, and desperate to prove herself when she landed an internship at Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious consulting firms. She was broke, ambitious, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. That's when she met Ethan Cole. Ethan was everything Amara wasn't. At 32, he was the youngest partner in the company's history, devastatingly handsome, and colder than a winter morning in Chicago. His steel-gray eyes could silence a room, and his perfectly tailored suits probably cost more than most people's rent. Everyone was terrified of him, including Amara. Her first day was a disaster. 20 minutes late because of subway delays, she rushed into the elevator clutching her coffee and portfolio when the doors opened on the executive floor. And there he was. "You must be the new intern," his voice was deep and unimpressed. "You're late." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. The subway was late." "I'm sure. Don't let it happen again." He stepped out without looking back, leaving Amara mortified and strangely fascinated. For the first month, their interactions were purely professional. He assigned tasks through his assistant, reviewed her work with minimal feedback, and treated her like she was invisible. Amara told herself she didn't care, but she was lying. There was something about him that drew her in. Maybe it was the way he commanded respect in every room he entered, or how he never raised his voice but somehow made everyone listen. Or maybe it was those rare moments when she'd catch him staring out his office window, looking utterly lonely. But there was something else Amara didn't know about Ethan. Behind his success lay a constant battle with the company's board of directors, led by his father's former business partner, Richard Morrison, Sandra's father. Morrison had never forgiven William Cole for becoming the majority shareholder, and he'd been waiting for any opportunity to remove the Cole family from power. Determined to impress him, Amara started staying late. Little did she know, this decision would change everything. It was a Thursday night in October when everything shifted. Amara was working on a presentation due the next morning, struggling with complex data analysis. The office was empty except for security and him. She heard footsteps approaching her cubicle around 9 p.m. "Still here, Amara?" She looked up, surprised he even knew her name. Ethan stood behind her, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. For once, he looked almost human. "Just trying to finish this presentation for the Henderson account." He frowned, moving closer to examine her screen. She caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her heart skip. "You're overcomplicating it. Here, let me show you." For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side. Not boss and intern, just two people solving a problem together. He was patient, explaining concepts she didn't understand, and Amara found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor. "You have good instincts," he said as they finally finished. "Trust them more." When it was just them, he told her to call him Ethan. This became their routine. Late nights, shared takeout dinners, and conversations that had nothing to do with work. Amara learned that he'd taken over his father's company at 28 after his dad's heart attack. That he felt trapped by expectations. That he hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years. But she also began to see glimpses of the pressure he was under. Phone calls that made his jaw clench. Board meetings that left him looking drained. The weight of carrying a legacy that wasn't entirely his choice. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just be normal," he admitted one evening over Chinese takeout. Amara felt her heart flutter, but also a pang of insecurity. Normal? She was probably the most normal person he'd ever met. Too normal for someone like him. Slowly, she started seeing a different side of him. He began remembering how she liked her coffee, black with 2 sugars. He'd check on her when she worked late, sometimes bringing dinner from his favorite restaurants. Once, when she was struggling with a difficult client, he defended her work in a meeting, his voice firm and protective. Amara's analysis is thorough and accurate. If you have concerns, address them to me. The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine, but it also made her hyper-aware of the stares from other colleagues. She was just an intern. What was she doing getting this kind of attention from Ethan Cole? The almost kiss happened on a rainy evening. They were alone in his office, reviewing quarterly reports. She looked up to find him staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Amara," he whispered, moving closer. Time seemed to stop. His hand reached up to touch her face, his thumb tracing her cheek. She could feel his breath on her lips, see the conflict in his eyes. Then his phone rang. He pulled back instantly, answering with a curt, "Cole speaking." But she saw the regret in his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as he turned away. That night, Amara went home knowing she was in love with a man she could never have. A man who lived in penthouses while she shared a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. A man who belonged to a world she'd only ever seen in magazines. 3 weeks later, everything came crashing down. The company Christmas party was being held at the Ritz-Carlton. Amara had bought a simple black dress, nothing fancy, but it made her feel confident. She was excited because Ethan had asked her to help with some presentations that evening. But when she arrived, she noticed the whispers. "Did you hear? Ethan's getting married tomorrow." "Tomorrow? That's so sudden." Sandra Morrison, the senator's daughter. "Apparently, it's been planned for months." Amara felt like someone had punched her in the chest. Married? Tomorrow? How could she have been so naive? She found him by the bar, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. But now all she could see was a stranger. "Is it true? Are you getting married tomorrow?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Around them, the party continued, laughter, music, clinking glasses, but they were in their own bubble of heartbreak. "Yes," he finally whispered. "Were you ever going to tell me?" He grabbed her arm gently as she turned to leave. "It's not like that. What we have, it's real." "But Sandra, this marriage was arranged by our families years ago. I can't just..." "Can't what? Choose your own life? Choose love? You don't understand the pressure, the expectations." "You're right. I don't understand how someone can be so cowardly." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. She saw the pain flash across his face. "If I met you before her, everything would be different." He pulled her into an empty conference room, away from prying eyes. In the darkness, with only city lights streaming through windows, he took her hands in his. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to fall for you." Instead of answering with words, he kissed her. Desperate, passionate, full of everything they couldn't say. She melted into him, tasting the salt of her own tears, feeling his heart racing against her chest. When they broke apart, they both knew it was goodbye. "I have to go," she whispered. "Congratulations on your wedding, Mr. Cole." What neither of them knew was that Richard Morrison had been watching from across the room, his calculating mind already forming a plan. If Ethan was having an affair with a lowly intern, it was exactly the scandal Morrison needed to finally remove the Coles from power. Amara went home that night and wrote her resignation letter. She couldn't watch him marry someone else. She couldn't pretend that what happened between them didn't matter. The next morning, she was packing her desk when her roommate Sarah called from their living room. "Amara. You need to see this." Amara walked out to find her glued to the morning news. Her blood ran cold when she saw the headline scrolling across the screen. "Breaking, Society wedding cancelled, groom disappears hours before ceremony." The reporters stood outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, where hundreds of confused guests were leaving. Sources close to the family confirm that Ethan Cole, heir to Cole Industries, failed to appear at his wedding to Sandra Morrison this morning. The bride and her family have yet to comment. Amara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at our coffee shop. We need to talk." Their coffee shop. The little place on 5th Street where they'd gotten takeout during those late nights. Despite Sarah's warnings about rebound drama, Amara was already out the door. She found him in their corner booth, still wearing his wedding suit but with the tie undone and jacket crumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "You came. What did you do, Ethan?" "What I should have done months ago. I chose love. I chose you." He reached across the table, taking her hands. "I stood at that altar, and all I could think about was you. Your laugh, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, how you make even the worst days better just by being there. But your family, the company, Sandra. I'll handle all of that. But I couldn't marry her knowing I'm in love with you." Right there in the middle of the coffee shop, he kissed her again. But this time it wasn't goodbye, it was a promise. "I love you, Amara. I've loved you since that first night we worked late together." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. But outside, unbeknownst to them, a photographer with a telephoto lens was capturing every intimate moment. They went to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. Everything felt surreal, like Amara was living in a dream. This morning she thought she'd lost him forever, and now. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as he poured wine. "There's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They spent the afternoon talking, planning, dreaming about a future she never thought possible. But reality has a way of crashing back when you least expect it. His phone started ringing around 6 p.m. Then again. And again. "I should take this," he said, looking at the caller ID. "It's my mother." Amara could hear Margaret Cole's voice through the phone even from across the room. She was furious. "How could you do this to our family? To Sandra? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan's jaw tightened as he listened. "I'm in love with someone else, Mother." "Love? This is about some fling with your intern, isn't it?" "I heard the rumors." Amara's stomach dropped. "What rumors?" "Her name is Amara, and she's not a fling. I'm going to marry her." Silence. Then, "Over my dead body." The line went dead. But the calls didn't stop. News outlets, gossip columnists, business reporters, everyone wanted a statement about the runaway groom and his mystery woman. By evening, the story had exploded across social media. #RunawayGroom was trending, and somehow, someone had identified Amara. Her LinkedIn profile, her college graduation photos, even pictures from her social media accounts were being shared and dissected by strangers. "Oh God, Ethan," she whispered, scrolling through the comments on her phone. "Look what they're saying about me." The comments were brutal. Gold digger. Home wrecker. Desperate intern who seduced her boss. The class differences that had always made her insecure were now being weaponized by thousands of anonymous critics. "Turn it off," Ethan said, taking her phone. "None of it matters." But it did matter. Because Richard Morrison was already leveraging the scandal, calling emergency board meetings and whispering to major clients about instability in leadership. The next few days were a nightmare of camera flashes and shouted questions. Paparazzi camped outside Amara's apartment building, forcing her to sneak out through the basement parking garage. They followed her to the grocery store, to her parents' house, even to her favorite coffee shop. "Miss Chen. Miss Chen. Is it true you're pregnant with Ethan Cole's baby? How long have you been having an affair? What do you say to people calling you a gold digger?" Each question felt like a physical blow. Amara had never experienced anything like this: the constant scrutiny, the invasion of privacy, the judgment from complete strangers. Meanwhile, at Coal Industries, the crisis was escalating. Richard Morrison had called an emergency board meeting. "Gentlemen," Morrison addressed the room, "we have a serious problem. Our CEO has shown a complete lack of judgment, abandoning his responsibilities for some infatuation. Our stock price has dropped 12% since Saturday. The Morrison account, worth $50 million annually, is being pulled immediately." Ethan sat at the head of the table, his face stone cold. "My personal life doesn't affect my ability to run this company, doesn't it?" Morrison smiled coldly. "You left your own wedding, Ethan. You've made us all look like fools. The Henderson Group is reconsidering their contract. The Japanese investors are having second thoughts about the merger." Board member after board member expressed their concerns. The optics were terrible. The company's reputation was suffering. Maybe it was time for new leadership. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence," Morrison announced. "Effective immediately." The vote was close, 6-5, but Ethan retained his position by a single vote. For now. When he came home that evening, Amara was sitting on his couch with her laptop, reading article after article about their scandalous affair. "Maybe they're right," she said without looking up. "Maybe I am just some nobody who doesn't belong in your world." "Don't say that. Look at this headline: From Intern to Heiress, the Cinderella story gone wrong. They're calling me a social climber, a fortune hunter. What if they're right? What if I'm just..." "Stop." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You're the most genuine person I know. You fell in love with me when you thought I was just your difficult boss, remember? Before you knew about the money, the status, any of it. But doubt was a powerful thing, and it was eating away at her confidence with every nasty comment, every judgmental stare. 2 days later, those doubts seemed justified when Margaret Cole appeared at Amara's apartment door. Somehow, the older woman had managed to slip past the paparazzi. She walked into the small living room like she owned it, her critical gaze taking in every detail of the modest space. "You seem like a nice girl, Amara. Smart, hardworking. But you're in over your head." The weight of the past week, the cameras, the headlines, the cruel comments, had taken their toll. Amara felt smaller than ever sitting across from this elegant, powerful woman. "I suppose you're here to tell me I don't belong in Ethan's world. You don't. But that's not your fault. It's his, for putting you in this impossible position." Margaret opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. "There's $50,000 in here. Enough to pay off your student loans and start fresh somewhere new. Somewhere the cameras can't find you." Amara stared at the envelope, thinking about the photographer who'd tried to climb her fire escape yesterday. About the woman who'd followed her into the bathroom at Starbucks, demanding to know what it was like to steal someone's husband. "You want to buy me off? I want to save both of you from destroying each other. Do you see what this is doing to him? He's losing everything, his company, his reputation, his family. And for what? A love story that the whole world thinks is fake?" Margaret raised her voice slightly. After Margaret left, Amara sat staring at that envelope for hours. $50,000. More money than she'd ever seen. And maybe, just maybe, an escape from the fishbowl her life had become. When she called Ethan that night to tell him about his mother's visit, he was furious. "I'll handle her. This doesn't change anything between us." But it did change things. The pressure was mounting from all sides: his family, the media, the board of directors. Even their former colleagues were choosing sides, and most weren't choosing theirs. That's when Sandra Morrison decided to make her move. Sandra Morrison had been planning her revenge since the moment Ethan left her at the altar. While the media focused on the love triangle, Sandra had been working behind the scenes, using her father's connections to orchestrate something much darker. It happened on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the cancelled wedding. Amara was walking home from the grocery store, trying to avoid the main streets where photographers still lurked, when a black SUV pulled up beside her. 2 men got out. "Miss Chen, we need you to come with us." Before she could react, they grabbed her. One covered her mouth while the other opened the car door. She tried to scream, to fight, but they were too strong. The last thing she remembered was a strange smell from a cloth over her nose, and then everything went black. She woke up in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Her hands were tied behind her back, her head pounding. It took a moment to remember what happened. "You're awake. Good." Amara turned to see Sandra Morrison stepping out of the shadows. She looked different from the polished society girl from magazines. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild with desperation and rage. "Sandra? What? Why are you doing this? You ruined my life. Do you have any idea what it's like to be left at the altar? To have your fiancé choose some nobody in turn over you?" The humiliation in Sandra's voice was palpable. For someone who'd lived her entire life in the spotlight of high society, being publicly rejected was the ultimate shame. "This is insane. Ethan will find me." "Will he?" "I made sure to leave enough clues pointing to other suspects. Maybe it was angry investors upset about the cancelled Morrison-Cole merger. Maybe some random criminal targeting wealthy families. Maybe even corporate rivals trying to destabilize coal industries. The police have so many leads to follow." Amara's blood ran cold. Sandra had planned this carefully. "What do you want?" "I want my life back. I want Ethan to marry me like he was supposed to. And you're going to help make that happen." Sandra pulled out her phone and started recording. "Here's what you're going to say, Ethan: I can't do this anymore. The pressure from your family, from society, from the media, it's too much. I'm leaving the city, and I don't want you to follow me. Forget about me and marry Sandra. Be happy. I won't do it. Then you'll die here, and it'll look like you ran away because you couldn't handle the pressure." Very tragic. Very believable. The next few hours were the longest of Amara's life. Sandra left her alone in that cold, dark warehouse while she went to arrange things. Amara worked at the ropes binding her hands until her wrists were bloody, but they wouldn't budge. She thought about everything: Ethan, the media circus, her parents who were probably seeing their daughter portrayed as a villain on the news. Had loving him really been worth all this? Across the city, Ethan was going out of his mind. He'd been calling Amara all day, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Her roommate said she'd gone grocery shopping around 6 p.m. but never came home. By midnight, he'd called every hospital, every police station. He hired a private investigator and drove around the city until dawn, checking every place she might have gone. The media was having a field day with the missing person story. "Gold digger goes missing," read one headline. "Runaway bride runs away again," read another. But Richard Morrison was pleased. Whether Amara turned up dead or alive, the scandal would finally be enough to remove Ethan from power. Something was very wrong. Amara wouldn't just disappear. Not like this. What Sandra didn't know was that Amara had managed to work her phone out of her back pocket during the first day. Hidden under her jacket, she'd started a voice memo, recording everything Sandra said. What Amara didn't know was that Ethan had tracking software installed on her phone, something his security team had suggested after the paparazzi started following her. The GPS signal had been offline for 2 days, but Friday morning, it suddenly came back online. Warehouse District, East Side. Ethan called the police, but he couldn't wait. He grabbed his security team and headed there himself, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope. Sandra had returned with an ultimatum: make the breakup video, or face the consequences. But she'd made one crucial mistake: she'd gotten overconfident, allowing Amara's phone to reconnect to the network. "Make him believe you never loved him," Sandra demanded, her desperation growing more volatile by the hour. "Make him hate you, and maybe he'll finally come back to me." "He never loved you, Sandra. That's why he left." The slap echoed through the warehouse. Sandra's composure was completely gone now. "He did love me. We were perfect together. Until you came along and poisoned his mind with your ordinariness." That's when they heard his voice outside the warehouse. "Amara. Amara, are you in there?" The door burst open, and suddenly Ethan was there, desperate, fierce, and more handsome than ever. Behind him came his security team and 2 police officers. "Oh my God, are you hurt?" He rushed to untie her while his security team restrained Sandra, who was screaming obscenities. "How did you find me?" "Your phone. You were recording." He held up his phone, showing her the audio file that had been automatically synced to the cloud. "I heard everything," she said. As police arrested Sandra, she kept screaming, "This isn't over. You can't just throw away everything our family's built. You'll regret this. The board will never accept her." But Ethan only had eyes for Amara. "I thought I'd lost you. When you disappeared, I realized none of the rest of it matters. Not my mother's approval, not the company, not the media circus. Nothing matters except you. I was so scared," she admitted. "You're safe now. I'm never letting you out of my sight again." At the hospital, while doctors checked her for injuries, Ethan made some calls. The recording of Sandra's confession would clear up the kidnapping, but it also revealed something else: Richard Morrison's role in destabilizing the company. "I talked to my father. Told him everything. About Sandra, about the kidnapping, about Morrison's power play." "What did he say?" Ethan smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. "He said it was about time we cleaned house." The confrontation with Margaret Cole happened the next day at the family estate. Amara insisted on being there, no more hiding, no more letting others fight her battles. She was done being ashamed of who she was. "You have some nerve bringing her here," Margaret said when she saw them, though her tone was less harsh than before. The kidnapping had shaken even her. "Mother, enough. Amara is going to be my wife. You can accept that and have a relationship with us, or you can lose your son forever." "She's not one of us, Ethan. Look at what this has cost." "I am looking. I'm looking at the woman who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who was willing to sacrifice her own happiness for mine. I'm looking at the strongest, most genuine person I've ever met." Amara felt something shift inside her. For weeks, she'd let other people define her worth, let their judgments make her question herself. But Ethan was right, she was strong. She'd survived poverty, worked her way through college, excelled in a competitive internship, and even survived a kidnapping. She wasn't some gold digger or social climber. She was a survivor. His father, William Cole, had been quietly watching from his chair by the fireplace. Finally, he spoke with the authority of a man who'd built an empire. "Margaret, sit down." Even his formidable wife obeyed. "Son, in 40 years of marriage, I've learned something important. Love like what you two have doesn't come along often. Your mother and I, we had an arranged marriage too. It worked, but it was never passionate. Never, alive." He looked at Amara kindly. "Young lady, my son has been miserable for years. Successful, but miserable. In the past few months, I've watched him become the man I always hoped he'd be. If that's because of you, then welcome to the family. And," William continued with a slight smile, "Richard Morrison has been removed from the board. Turns out investors don't like board members whose daughters kidnap people. Funny how that works." Margaret's face was stone, but she was outnumbered and, perhaps for the first time, she was seeing Amara not as a threat, but as a young woman who'd endured incredible pressure with grace. "Fine," she said finally. "But don't expect me to plan your wedding." Ethan grinned. "Actually, we were hoping you'd help us elope to Paris next week." For the first time since Amara had known her, Margaret Cole smiled. "Paris? Well, I suppose I could make some calls." Later that evening, news broke that Cole Industries stock had rebounded stronger than ever. Ethan's authentic love story, as the media now called it, had actually improved the company's image. Consumers loved a CEO who chose love over convention. Richard Morrison's hostile takeover attempt had failed spectacularly. Sometimes, love really did conquer all. 6 months later, Amara stood in a small chapel in Montmartre, wearing her grandmother's vintage lace dress, looking into the eyes of the man she'd fallen in love with during those late nights at the office. The media attention had finally died down, though a few photographers still managed to capture their Parisian wedding from a respectful distance. Their first kiss as husband and wife was witnessed by both sets of parents, Sarah, and a dozen close friends. Margaret even cried a little, though she denied it later. At their reception in a small Parisian bistro, Ethan stood to make a toast. "They say you can't choose who you fall in love with. But I disagree. Every day, I choose Amara. I choose her strength, her compassion, her terrible taste in movies. I choose her dreams, her ambitions, and yes, even her stubborn streak that keeps me grounded. Most importantly, I choose to build a life where love comes first, always." As they danced to La Vie en Rose under the Paris stars, Amara realized that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that seem impossible at first. The ones that require you to fight for them, to believe in them even when the whole world is against you. 2 years later. Today, Amara is a partner at Morrison & Associates. William Cole had insisted on it as part of welcoming her to the family, and her work more than justified the promotion. Ethan started the Cole Foundation for educational scholarships, helping kids from backgrounds like Amara's achieve their dreams. Margaret and Amara still have their moments, but she absolutely adores their 6-month-old daughter, Emily Rose Cole. "She has your determination," Margaret tells Amara, "but thankfully, she has our family's bone structure." The media attention eventually faded, replaced by new scandals and new love stories. Occasionally, they still get photographed at charity events, but now the headlines read "Power Couple" instead of "Scandal." As for Sandra Morrison, she was sentenced to 5 years for kidnapping but got out on good behavior after 3. Last anyone heard, she moved to Europe and married a French diplomat. Amara hopes she found the happiness that was never meant to be with Ethan. Sometimes people ask Amara if it was worth it, all the drama, the family conflicts, the media circus, the danger. Was love really enough? She looks at Ethan playing with their daughter in their garden, his laugh mixing with hers, Margaret teaching Emily her first French words, and she knows the answer. Love isn't just enough. When you fight for it, when you choose it every single day, when you refuse to let the world tell you who you're supposed to love, love becomes everything. And that's how an intern fell for her boss, survived a media storm, escaped a kidnapping, won over the toughest mother-in-law in Manhattan, and lived happily ever after.